Good morning, everybody. Corey Hughes, Bloody History. So today we are going to continue on with the death of Martin Schrand. We should be able to wrap this up today. I don't feel like doing any preambles or fucking housekeeping and shit, so let's just get started. Marine Air Control Squadron 1. God, this is so broken up. 1st Marine Air, whatever. This is all preamble. Basically, the Atsugi Fleet is headquartered in San Francisco. From Commanding Officer to Lieutenant James R. Miller, U.S. Marine Corps. Subject: investigation to inquire into circumstances surrounding the death of Private Martin, is actually Martin E. Schrand, Martin Elmo Schrand, 1659634, U.S. Marine Corps, at about 1900 hours on the 6th of January, 1957. Reference Chapter 2, 3, 4, and 5, 1955, Naval Supplement to the Manual for Court Martials, 1951. You are hereby appointed as investigating officer to inquire into the something and circumstances surrounding the death of Private Martin D. Schrand. It's Martin E. Schrand, actually. USMC, 1900 hours, the 6th of January, 1958, on board the U.S. Naval Air Station, QB Point, Philippines. QB Point, also known as Subic Bay. 2, you will gain a thorough investigation into all of the circumstances connected with his death. You will include in your report findings of something and opinions as to the causes and responsibility for the death, including any recommended actions, maybe. If by any time during the investigation there is any suggestion that misconduct on the part of any personnel is involved in the accident, you are further directed to notify subject personnel of the time and place of the meeting of the investigation, and that he will be party to the investigation and accorded his rights as such pursuant to Naval Supplement and Manual for Court Martials, as to the duty of the investigating officer to designate individuals as parties to the investigation during the proceedings when appropriate. Attention is particularly, looks like invited of something 0304 Naval Supplements to the Manual for Court Martials. And that's from MC Wiley. It says acting, but he's obviously is the commander who wrote the letter. What else do we have here? From First Lieutenant James Miller to Commanding Officer. Subject: investigation into the circumstances surrounding the death of Martin Schrand, about 1900 hours on the 5th of January, 1958. Referencing all that stuff that we mentioned before. Enclosed. All right. So, enclosed MACS 1 appointing order of January 1958. Statement of Lieutenant Commander Walbridge. Statement of First Lieutenant H.B. Cherry, U.S. Marine Corps. Statement of Corporal R.L. Rowe, U.S. Marine Corps Corporal of the Guard. Statement of HM3 R.A. Holt, U.S. Navy. Copy certificate of death. 7 is statements of W.F.H. Matheson, U.S. Navy. Photographs taken at scene of shooting. Statement of Sergeant H.R. Godfrey, U.S. Marine Corps, Sergeant of the Guard. Statement of the medical officer of the day, Station Hospital, Navy 3902, if I'm not mistaken. Not 3002. 3902 was probably, or maybe it is 3002. I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of the Iwakuni medical base. Preliminary statements. A, in accordance with enclosure and in accordance with reference, an investigation was started on the 6th of January, 1958 to inquire into the facts and circumstances surrounding the death of Private Martin D. Schrand. The investigation was conducted in the following manner. the interviewing and or procuring of witness statements from available witnesses and such other persons whose testimony appeared to yield information as to the death or related events. 2, the interviewing and or procuring of written statements for organizations involved after the death. C, no persons were designated as interested parties to the investigation. D, in accordance with reference. B, this investigation was received by MACS-1 in the field on the island of Corregidor, PI on or about 13th of February 1958. Due to the frequent redeployment of this unit in the field prior to and during Operation Strongback, the clerical processes and correspondence with this investigation have been slow and of limited availability, resulted in unavoidable delay in the collection of evidence, drafting, and submission of the report. All right, so Operation Strongback was this huge invasion operation that they did. Kerry Thornley was involved in it. There were pictures of him in the newspaper when he took part. He took part in the amphibious assault section of it, which is interesting because when you go back and you look at his record, it says, he went through basic training, and it doesn't indicate he went through combat training. It instead indicates he went through basic AAA man training, right? But you have him in basic AAA man training for well over a year. And that has to be a cover for other things he did, because once he gets to Atsugi, he takes part in Operation Strongback in the amphibious assault unit, right? You don't do that without training. And the only place he ever could have done that was under the time when it said he was doing AAA basic training, whatever the fuck that is. I mean, Diana Thomas figured out what it is. I have to go back and double check what she sent to me. But, yeah, so Operation Strongback was a big deal. And that's why a lot of the guys who were stationed at Atsugi were drawn into further into the Far East, away from Japan and into places like the Philippines and Taiwan. All right, so 2, finding of fact. A, that on about 1900 hours on 5 January 1958 in the area of Carrier Pier, Naval Air Station QB, Point, Philippine Islands, Private Martin. Why do they keep saying D? It's Martin Elmo Schrand, Martin E. Schrand. Not D. This is the 3rd or 4th time I've seen the fucking D here. It's not a D. 1639694. USMC was fatally wounded with a discharge from a riot-type shotgun under the circumstances listed below. B, at the above time and place. See, I've written fucking thousands of police reports. I don't like this style at all. At all. At the above time and place, I would never say something like at the above time and place. You never do. You never reference your fucking heading in a police report. Oh my God, this is like such amateur shit. At the above time and place, the sentry on post at the crypto van, a private first-class persons, heard a shot from the area containing the parked motor vehicle and informed the squadron duty officer, 2nd Lieutenant Hubert B. Cherry, the 2nd U.S. Marine Corps, and the corporal of the guard, Corporal Ronald L. Rowe, U.S. Marine Corps, by whom he had been inspected a minute or so before in their inspection of the area and guard. Upon checking, the SDO and corporal of the guard discovered Private Schrand lying on his back in a manner similar to the photograph, enclosure 8. Except the weapon was underneath him. Okay, so this is a very important point. Let me finish this. Private Schrand was laying in a pool of blood and wounded as set forth in enclosure 6. Okay, so here's a problem. So when you look at the photograph, and this is the first of several references to this, so we can say with certainty that the photograph that they took, the guy who found him, they had him lay on the ground in the position that the body was because they just got the body out of there. And the gun was facing away from him, perpendicular to his kneecap, and away, a couple inches away from the kneecap. That's not how the body was found. You'll come to see that this is the first of several statements that indicate that fucking gun was underneath his legs. Like, slide the gun over from the photographs directly under his knees and have him laying on top of it, and that's the position it was found in. Weird, huh? Weird. Doesn't make any fucking sense for that gun to be in that position, considering what the autopsy said of where the gun was positioned, give or take 8 to 14 inches away from under the left armpit, 2 to 3 inches down from under the armpit. And then the gun ends up under his knees as he's laying on his back. I'm trying to think this through. I've worked hundreds of crime scenes, albeit only a handful of serious bodily injury cases, and only one homicide that I was basically just a tag along for the sheriff's office crime scene unit. But I know crime scenes, and I understand the basics of ballistics, and I understand that it's impossible for this to have occurred in the manner in which they said. He's spinning the gun, he drops the gun, it hits the ground, and the bullet strikes him completely 90 degrees to his body right here, right? The gun must be on the ground at an angle coming back at him, so that means his body must have been at a perpendicular angle, right? So he had been leaning over. Does that with his arm up like this, instead of catching him to the front where he would have been reaching for the gun like this, where it should have shot him either in the face, the chin, or the chest area with maybe a little bit of turn, right? Which the autopsy would show. No. What I see here is someone who had their weapon pointed at them and went like this to shield themselves and were shot directly right here. That's what I'm pretty confident that's what Martin Schrand did. Whomever he handed his weapon to. Because that's what had to have what had happened. He had to have known the person. He had to have handed the person the weapon. That person must have put a shotgun shell in it and then shot him. And he went like this. That's the only thing that makes sense. And then the weapon was placed under him to stage it. That's the best I can give you from my interpretation of what happened. All right. The SDO notified sickbay from a telephone in the crash crew area and returned to the scene, or the crash crew area. At 1920, an ambulance driven by Robert A. Holt, HM3 USN, arrived at the scene and removed Private Schrand to the station hospital. F. Death occurred between 1920 and 1930 hours in the ambulance. 6. It is medical opinion of the medical officer of the day that Private Schrand was beyond aid from the moment of the shooting. By interview of all persons involved, the investigator established that no definite form of first aid was applied due to the extreme nature of the wound. Private Schrand had been fully instructed in his duties, and the Model 12 riot gun having been on guard duty and attended guard school for at least 2 days previous. So, Schrand was no slouch, is what they're saying. He'd been fully instructed on how to use the weapon and how to perform his duties. He was a troublemaker, and that's what got him in the Marines in the first place. I think back in his hometown, he got in some trouble, and they're like, look, boy, you're going to go to the Marines or you're going to go to jail. You take your pick. And so, of course, he goes to the Marines. I think he was involved in like an armed robbery or something like that. I might be mistaken, but it was some kind. It wasn't just some simple crime. It was a big deal that got him into the Marines. And then once he's in the Marines, I don't know if we'll come across it in this set of paperwork, but he ends up getting. He was promoted because everyone gets promoted when they've been in there for so long, like private, first class. And then he got demoted because something happened, and he ended up setting a mattress on fire. And then it was. God, I'm trying to remember if he was paired with Oswald before or after the mattress incident. I think he was paired with Oswald after the mattress incident. I'm not sure, but I'll have to double check that. But that's some weird stuff, right? Then he ends up dead. It reminds me of in those movies when you got a crew of 6 guys in a heist and you can tell one guy says some dumb shit or just is a little sketchy or a tweaker, and then he's the guy they take out. You know what I mean? It seems like Schrand was the weak link here. All right. The MACS-1 Guard was operating under verbal appointments at this time, having recently... I can't read that. Something from LST. Arrived. No, it's not arrived, is it? No. He recently something from an LST. An LST is a boat. There was no guard book or log that this investigation could find. J, it was in an established squadron policy. It was an established squadron policy that sentries on post can carry their weapons with chambers empty, the safety on, and 5 rounds in the cylinder. Under no circumstances were rounds to be injected into the chamber unless the weapon was to be fired or under supervised instruction. In those interests of safety, permission had been extended for some sentries to carry rounds in their pocket. I'm starting to hear the words of cover-up already. The flavor of cover-up is starting to seep through here. Okay, the weapon at the scene was a Winchester Model 12 riot-type shotgun, 982244, containing 1 spent round. This weapon does not have a sling and is illustrated in enclosure 8. It's a standard Winchester 12-gauge shotgun. It was called a riot-type shotgun because of the purpose. L, under extensive examination by Fred H. Matheson, Shavard, Tech W2, USN, no discrepancy in the weapon was revealed, meaning they didn't find anything wrong with it. M, there was no evidence discovered of criminal activity in this case. There was no evidence discovered of suicide. 3, opinions. A, in the absence of any evidence of gross neglect or intended self-infliction, it is my opinion that Private Martin D. Schrand died in the line of duty and not as a result of his own misconduct. Private Schrand was completely familiar with his duties and with the operation of a Model 12 riot-type shotgun and was in sound physical condition. The wound was inflicted by the Winchester Model 12 riot-type shotgun number 982244 found at the scene. The discharge of the riot gun was not due to malfunction. Attempts to reconstruct the act of the shooting resulted in no opinion being formed as to the manner in which the weapon was fired. Okay. All right. You got to understand how to interpret this fucking military legalese. Let me say this again. This is the most important sentence in this paper. Attempts to reconstruct the act of the shooting resulted in no opinion being formed as to the manner in which the weapon was fired. Meaning they tried to recreate that shooting and couldn't, but they can't say that. Let me read it again. Attempts to reconstruct the act of the shooting resulted in no opinion being formed as to the manner in which the weapon was fired. This is what they're doing. Beats me. That's what they're saying. We don't have a fucking clue how this happened because we tried to reconstruct it and we couldn't. That's what they're saying. F, no definite form of first aid treatment could have been employed, nor was by the people present due to the nature of the wound. 4, recommendation that continuing emphasis be exerted to acquaint all personnel with the instructions for standing guard duty and in handling the Model 12 riot gun, blah, blah. B, while it had no effect on the death occurring in this case, knowledge of the location of accessible telephones in the guard area should be had by all persons concerned. C, that proper guard log and records be kept whenever possible by the sergeant and corporal of the guard. Duh. All right, we have some... looks like we have some Warren Commission testimony here, if I can pull this up. All right, I'm going to have to rotate this, and hopefully it won't screw everything up. All right. It doesn't look like we have the whole thing here, just the first couple pages, but that's fine. We don't need to be reading a whole bunch of pages of this. This is from Daniel Patrick Powers, the guy who was in charge of the unit that went from Jacksonville to Biloxi at the beginning of May. What was it? May 3rd of 1957. And we're not going to get into all the contradictory stuff. Maybe it'll cover it here in this testimony. But I think this is mostly focused on Schrand from Armstrong's collection. But yeah, Powers ends up, getting killed, suicide, bullet hole, right temple, gun found in left hand. So we know the deal. I need to look up the other 5 guys, or the other 4 guys besides Powers, and I need to get more confirmation of Powers. And so, yeah, that's totally another conversation. But yeah, let's go through this. Names Powers, Daniel Patrick, and they're talking about Schrand, Martin E., private, 1639694, spelled SCHRAND. They're going to talk about how it's spelt for a second, and then Mr. Jenner says, right, I want to get that straight because we do have an incident that occurred with respect to him, and I want to ask you about it. Yes, sir, it did. Those are all the men. Now you were fellows destined to be together pretty much as a group from that point on for some time. How do you mean destined? Says Powers. Jenner says, did it turn out that the 5 of you, your assignments from then on they ran relatively parallel? Up to, you could say, that's true to a certain extent. We did attend school there. Then from Mississippi, we were assigned orders to go overseas and report to El Toro, California. Here, while we were at Mississippi, it was parallel. We attended the same classes in the same particular group as far as the initial starting and training of graduation, if you would like to call it that. Yes. And then once we got to California, they changed somewhat because of the people reported in early to California, and some of them reported later. So this getting into an overseas draft meant that some were leaving out of California earlier than others, of course, which would mean their assignments as far as orders were different. I would say that 4 of the names mentioned previously, Camarada, Oswald, Powers, and Schrand, went to the Far East. Bandoni and Brereton, I'm not sure where they went. I think they went to the East Coast, as I recall. Jenner says, what was your first impression of Oswald? Well, let me stop right here for a second. This is important because Bandoni and Brereton, I don't think we hear it again from them at all in the story. Bandoni, I recently looked up. He's from Iowa. And when you pull all the stuff on like Ancestry and whatnot, you do find a very basic family tree of this particular Bandoni. But there's a whole bunch of other Bandonis of the same name, same middle initial from New York and other places. So, yeah, finding out the goods on these people shouldn't be that fucking hard, but it seems to be. The other thing that's important about this timing is that all these guys, the 5 of them, excluding Oswald, all had to report to El Toro for the draft on the 12th of July. Oswald had to be there the 9th. Why? Or did one Oswald have to be there the 12th? The other Oswald had to be there on the 9th, and they ditched the records of the Oswald who had to be there on the 12th. That's a possibility as well, because basically these guys will be together at El Toro for a couple weeks. The real El Toro, the big El Toro, not the Leiden Air Base, which is where Oswald will be when he goes to Santa Ana. When you hear people talk about Santa Ana, they're usually talking about the Leiden Air Facility. So, let me continue on. Mr. Jenner says, what was your first impression of Oswald when you traveled from Jacksonville to Biloxi and Keesler Field in Mississippi? Well, my first impression of this individual is that he was somewhat, to use the term, loner. He was an individual who was normally outside the particular group of Marines that were in this attachment to Keesler. I felt that he was a somewhat younger individual, less mature than the other boys. Again, this was just a personal opinion. Mr. Jenner asks, by the way, what is your age? My age at the moment is 27. All right. And what is the date of your birth? July 20th, 1936. At this particular time, I believe I was, so you were 3 years older than Oswald. He was born October 18th, 39. Yes, that's correct. Did any incident occur during your travel from the Naval Air Base in Jacksonville to Keesler Field in Biloxi, Mississippi, with respect to Oswald, which arrested your attention, or was there any question about him? No. Or was this relatively uneventful? It was uneventful, you might say. There's nothing that you would care to attach any significance to other than the fact that, for the most part, this was the first time we were ever on a train, and this was a somewhat new experience for the most part for most of us. I see. And how many travel days were you given? I believe it was an overnight travel, so probably 2 days, May 3rd to 4th is when we were actually reported in. Departed Jacksonville, Florida on the 2nd of May, 1957, and arrived in Biloxi, Mississippi. Biloxi. You happy? Biloxi. Okay, so I got talked to about it being Biloxi and not obeying the rules of phonics that we all like to fucking obey as English-speaking peoples. So, but I'll capitulate. Biloxi, Mississippi, for May. So we were reported for duty on that particular day. So you were there May 4th, 1957. That's correct. The top is cut off, and I'll try to see if I can fill in the gaps here. It says something of radar equipment which was used to guide or locate aircraft in the something training was completely parallel to mine. It was similar. It was the same context. Okay, so Oswald wasn't a radar operator. Sorry, like everyone says he was, but he was not. He was a plotting board operator at absolute best. But the course that we all know of, where he took, the course out of Biloxi. It was not a fucking radar operator course. It was a how to fix and diagnose and repair radar. Because he was a fucking radar repairman, not a fucking radar operator. God, I wish people would do some real research and stop saying that's dumb shit. Jenner asks, and is that likewise true of these other men? That's also correct, yes. And your assignments from day to day were relatively parallel. Something. I would think they were exactly parallel as far as attending classes. We went to the same classes. We were at the same level of instruction throughout the whole school. I mean, we were brought right along. Some were above the others and in retention of what they were learning. We still were similar, I would say, exact in the classes that we did attend. These were in general. This was aircraft control and warning operator course. That's correct, yes. That's the course I'm talking about. That's a repair course. And it included the classes of uses of radar and other aircraft warning devices. Yes, sir. Were you awarded the what is known as MOS, Military Occupation Specialty? Yes, we were. I believe coming out of Jacksonville, Florida, we were given a general MOS of 6,700. And then explain that to me. MOS is Military Occupational Specialty, and all it does is categorize you as to what you're going to fall in when they issue you orders. And 6,700 is aircraft, and as I understand, my memory may be somewhat faded or dim. And when we did come out of Keesler, then we were added to the additional digit of 47, which would make us ground. I better not say ground control radar operator, for as a guess, I would call it an early warning system. And how long did you boys remain at Keesler? Exact dates would be from 4th of May to 4th of June 57, which is when we picked up our orders to go to California. Okay, so this is incorrect. Remember, because we have the picture of him graduating on the 18th. So this 4 of June is incorrect. And that's when we picked up our orders to go to California. That's a month from the day. I'm sorry, it says here, you will stand transferred June 19th, 1957, and you will report to your temporary duty station at 12 July 1957. This is when we were 2,400 hours. We were supposed to report in the temporary duty station, which was El Toro, California. Did you boys travel out to El Toro? From 19 June to 12 July 1957. This was somewhat blurred here. 16 days delay and 4 travel days by commercial. So it would be June is 30. It would be 11 and 12, which would be 20. Mr. Jenner says 16 days, 11 and 12. That would be 23 days. And Power says, yeah, so actually it must be 19 days and 4 days travel by commercial carrier. Or 19 days delay. Did you boys travel out to El Toro? No, we did not. Most of us went on leave from there from Mississippi to our homes and spent time there, and then proceeded to California by commercial vehicle. And you were living in Minneapolis at that time? No, I was not. My leave address, rural route number 2, Owatonna, Minnesota. That was my parents' home. Did you have any recollection? See, they never clarify where he's living because he's ended up buried. Oh, it's in Phoenix, not California. Sorry, he's buried in Phoenix in Maricopa County. And they don't address that here. And you were living in Minneapolis at the time. No, I wasn't. My leave address is Owatonna, Minnesota. That's my parents' home. Did you have any recollection of Oswald while he was at Keesler? That is, did he continue to use the term loner while he was at Keesler? I would say yes and no. A loner is a real poor term to use. All right. I think he was an individual that found it hard to come in close relationship to any one individual, and I don't say that he was one that... And then it cuts off, and I think we go deeper. We go into a totally different section. Let me see. Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll read this. This is further up in the document. So it skips a section. But yeah, so what you can tell here is that Powers was he was in charge of that group. Kind of says Oswald was a loner kind of the whole time. Kind of didn't form relationships. I think that's in part due to the fact that Oswald was part deaf in his left ear. Don't even know how the fuck he got into the Marines. Don't know how he passed half of his fucking classes in school, considering they say he wasn't there most of the time when he was truant in New York, right? So there's a lot of weird gaps that are plugged that shouldn't be. You know what I'm saying? And so Powers is an interesting character, and I don't know why they killed him. Probably because he knew. Well, he already talked. He already talked here to the Warren Commission. So why would they kill him a couple years later? What did he do? Did he send a letter to somebody? I don't know. It's very interesting, though. All right, so... Oh, maybe it does continue on, but the page numbers are way off. Page numbers are at 280 and 281 from 268 and 269. So let's continue on anyway. So Mr. Jenner asks, is this in 1958? And he goes, He goes, yes, sir. Instead of sending them back up to Japan and then have to come way back again, they just put them ashore at QB Point and they just put up a temporary house and continued the operation out of there. There was actually no radar site set up at that area, and we just got the gear and other material and trucks and apparatus and things and equipment was repaired and made ready for the next operation. See, Oswald was in a repair unit. He was a repair guy. He wasn't a fucking radar operator. Mr. Jenner says, and during your stay at the Philippines, were you ever at Subic Bay instead of QB Point? QB Bay and Subic Point are close proximity. QB Point is the landing, actually, and Subic Bay is the harbor. And you can almost call it one actual installation as far as I was concerned, but they were designated. QB Point was the landing strip and Subic Bay was the landing area. Mr. Jenner says, in some of Oswald's autobiographical material prepared either then or later, he refers to the fact that it was at Subic Bay, and that doesn't appear in the official orders, and he wondered where he got that, and now you explained it for us. Power says, you traveled in between both as far as they had the swimming point there. I remember that was at Subic, isn't it? Subic? I don't want to say, says Jenners. I thought it was Subic. I'm probably wrong. I won't say that you're wrong. I think you're right. It's QB Point and Subic Bay. Power says, yes, there was actually one installation in my mind. They were separated, but one was the harbor for ships and the other was for the aircraft. Now, was the same group that you described earlier that came from Jacksonville still together at QB Point when you rejoined the squadron? All but certain elements. I think the people in my particular group that originated in Jacksonville, the only people that were left was Schrand, Oswald, and myself, and the rest of them were dispersed in Japan or the Far East or the United States somewhere. And did an incident occur with respect to Mr. Schrand? Yes. He was. This happened after I arrived from the Japanese mainland. He was on guard duty one evening. He was shot to death. Now, I've never seen the official report or anything, but the scuttlebutt at the time was that he was shot underneath the right arm, and it came up from underneath the left neck, and it was by a shotgun, which we were authorized to carry while we were on guard duty. Were these also sometimes called riot guns? Riot guns, yes. And that's the only thing, that significance I attach to it, other than he was either leaning against the shotgun or was fooling with it, but he was shot anyway. Mr. Jenner, was there, you don't know what the official finding was with respect to, no, I do not. I never had any access to anything of this nature. Was there any scuttlebutt about it? No, other than he was fooling with the weapon. Other than that, we couldn't, as I recall, we could never realize how a guy could have shot himself other than there he was leaning on it this way, indicating, and it went boom and it went off. As far as you boys were concerned at the time, was there any scuttlebutt or speculation about anyone of you being involved in that incident? No, not to my recollection at all. When I say you, that includes Oswald. Not that I know of, sir. No, sir. Were there some instructions in connection with the use of, I can't see what that says. It's cut off. He was probably talking about the shotgun. Power says, I'm almost sure. Again, I can't say for sure, but it seems that we were issued 3 shells. And again, I'm not sure. It seems to me we were not supposed to put them in the weapon, or supposed to put them in the weapon and keep it out of the chamber. In other words, you jacked the chamber if you needed it, but your chamber itself should be kept free to avoid accidents. Yes, I think this was the rule, because you would have had to click them in order to get them out this way and avoid an incident such as what happened. Did you boys do any maintenance work in connection with your radar scanning assignment? We were not trained to do it, no. They had assigned personnel to do it. Do you recall anything in this connection with respect to guard duty relating to some kind of special airplane? Yes, this happened again, I think, after the rest of the squadron left to go back to the Japanese mainland, and some of us were assigned temporary duty in QB Point there. I believe there were 2 of us, or 3 of us from the squadron. Who were they? Murphy, I believe, was one of them, and Private First Class Murphy, and I don't recall the other individuals, who the other individuals were, but anyway, we were assigned there, and at this particular time, they were closely guarding a hangar, and as it developed, this was not knowing then what it was. It was a U-2 aircraft, and this was after the rest of the squadron left, which Oswald was included in for the mainland. Oswald was included in a group that had returned to the mainland. Yes, sir. Was Oswald still at QB Point when Marine Schrand was shot? I believe he was, yes. The whole squadron was there then, so he must have been there, yes. But Schrand's guard duty was not guard duty in connection with these special airplanes of which you now speak. Well, no, I don't believe so. I can't say for sure what it was regarding, but I don't think so. I think they were on site guarding the equipment that they had there, and it seemed to me that the Air Force moved in that particular hangar after the squadron went up. I think this is correct. Did you have an assignment when you were shipped to Corregidor? Yes, the assignment came between when I originally flew into QB Point, and then the squadron went on another operation where they were preparing after they prepared their equipment there, and we went down to Corregidor, and we stayed there approximately a month or 6 weeks at the most. And then we came back, and then the people they dropped off, the 4 or 5 personnel that were on temporary duty, and then the rest of the squadron continued on to the mainland. Was Oswald part of the group that was assigned to Corregidor? Yes, the whole squadron was assigned to it. And what did you do at Corregidor? We participated in, I think it was the 3rd Marine Division in the operation of military exercises. Same sort of thing that you'd been doing back in QB Point. Yes, with the exception now that we were plotting simulated aircraft, scanning for it. Any incident occurred that during that period involved Oswald? No, nothing that I recall. Something sticks in my mind about being on mess duty. There it is. But I can't recall what the incident was. I have a picture of it in my mind. Okay, so Oswald never worked in a damn radar station. He did very sparingly. Joseph Gajewski said he saw him he was good at the plotting board. That's it. That's the closest we got him to a radar unit. And here we have Powers acknowledging that this cocksucker was on fucking mess duty. Okay? All right, what's next? Something from the 3rd decade, the Jerry Rose article. Why not? I'll go ahead and I'll read. Let me see. We got still 10 pages to go. Let me read this. I think it's only a couple pages, and we'll probably call it at that point. This is by Jerry D. Rose, and it's called Martin Schrand. Jerry D. Rose is a known Kennedy researcher and author, so everything I'm about to read is his opinion. All right, and I'll see if I can't correct a couple things. Lee Harvey Oswald's possible status as an agent of the Central Intelligence Agency has been widely discussed in the research community. One scenario of the mechanism by which the CIA recruited Oswald into the ranks of its agents while Oswald was still in the U.S. Marine Corps has been suggested by a former agent of the CIA. The agent, James B. Wilcott, told the House Select Committee on Assassinations that fellow agency employees in Japan told him of Oswald's agent status. Wilcott suggested that the CIA had gained a handle on Oswald to use as leverage in recruiting him. This handle, quite possibly, being the agency's discovery that Oswald had murdered someone or committed some other serious crime. I don't buy that at all, just so you guys know. At all. Anthony Summers uses this quote to resurrect the mystery surrounding the death of Marine Martin Schrand in the Philippines in 1958 at the time that Oswald was stationed there. Schrand died while on guard duty at the Naval Air Station at QB Point on January 5, 1958. Summers quoted the statement of another Marine, Donald Camarada, that there was a rumor that Oswald may somehow have been responsible for Schrand's death. Could this have been the CIA's handle on Lee Oswald? So I'm moving into this under the predisposition that Jerry Rose is not a two Oswald guy, doesn't understand the two Oswald scheme. The name of Martin Schrand surfaces again in Volume 11 of the hearings of the HSCA, when the committee was more or less forced into investigating a clandestine military investigation of Oswald after the assassination. It queried the Office of Naval Intelligence whether it had made any such investigations. The answer, the only Oswald-related investigation done by the ONI after the assassination, was investigation of the Martin Schrand death. Not even a whisper of what investigation might have revealed was related to the HSCA or perhaps by the ONI to the HSCA. Warren Commission documentation contains a report of the investigations of Schrand's death conducted by the Marine Corps itself. The first investigation, dated 9th of January 1958, was by the Naval Air Station Security Officer Lieutenant Commander C.B. Walbridge. This report indicates that Schrand was walking a guard post in the motor pool area minutes after being posted and instructed by the corporal of the guard. He was carrying an M12 riot gun, a military form of shotgun normally used for guard duty. A guard in another area heard a shot, and other guard personnel rushed to the scene, finding Schrand lying on top of his weapon and alive but bleeding profusely. He was transported to the base hospital but died in the ambulance. The fatal wound was from a gunshot entering below Schrand's left arm and exiting his left shoulder, since no vital organs were penetrated. The lethality of the wound might be questioned. At the time of the shooting, about 7:20 at night, the area was secured and was then searched the next morning. According to Walbridge, it was then determined that, beyond doubt, no other person or persons were involved in the incident. Only then were the victim's personal belongings and the death weapon released to the commanding officer of Schrand's unit. Walbridge explained rather disingenuously that the delay was considered proper and necessary to absolve the Naval Air Station at QB Point and the local authorities of any connection with the incident. Much later, an official investigation of the case by Lieutenant James R. Miller concluded that Schrand died in the line of duty and not a result of his own misconduct. Miller explained this delay until the 31st of March as a result of a slow clerical process of the fact that the frequent redeployments of this unit in the field prior to and during Operation Strongback. All right, so there was a big delay of when this thing got done, and he's using Strongback as a reason why there was a delay. But these guys, okay, when there's a murder and there's an investigation, those guys have carte blanche to do whatever. If he needed to get out to a boat, they'd fly him out in a helicopter to a boat. Okay? No expense unspared, right? So there's no way that this is a valid excuse whatsoever. So we put off the investigation probably to allow intelligence to come in and do their thing. If murder was ruled out, as Walbridge said, beyond doubt, why did Schrand die? Was it suicide? Walbridge thought not, citing the fact that the gun's length from the trigger guard to the end was 5 inches longer than from the distance from Schrand's hand to his armpit, so that if it were suicide, it would have been necessary to use a foreign object to discharge the weapon. Also, it was noted that suicide victims usually aim their shots at some vital organ. The elimination of murder or suicide leaves us with accident as the remaining explanation. The investigators adopted this explanation, but had trouble with making it sound credible. For one thing, regulations for guard duty specified that no bullets were to be kept in the firing chamber of the M12 as it was being carried for routine guard duty. 5 cartridges were to be placed in the weapon's cylinder Or, for safety reasons, then 5 cartridges might be carried in the guard's pocket. Schrand apparently carried them in his pocket, since the authorities there at the base hospital uncovered 4 unused rounds in Private Schrand's pocket. Thus, before his accident, Schrand apparently loaded a live round in the chamber of his weapon, a violation of the rule that a round is not to be injected in the chamber unless the weapon was to be fired or under supervised instruction. Since Schrand was alone and not under supervised instruction, it would seem that he intended to fire the weapon, whether at himself or possibly at an intruder. However, that lethal shell got into the chamber of Schrand's weapon. The question remains how it could accidentally discharge under his armpit. Attempting to explain this, Walbridge manages to contradict himself in 2 successive sentences. Statements of the victim's friends indicated to the investigator that the victim was not prone to exercise his weapon as a drill piece. Correct. It said he was not prone to exercise it as a drill piece. That was a story they must have fabricated after the fact. It is felt that this accident may have been caused by using the riot gun to conduct manual of arms evolutions, and in doing so, the gun was accidentally discharged, causing the victim's death. At last, we find another Marine whose self-destructive insanity matches that of Oswald himself. Schrand blithely loads a bullet into his M12, disengages the trigger guard safety device. Walbridge says the device was not in the safe position when the weapon was later examined, and then does some dangerous evolutions, the result of which the butt of the gun drops to the ground and the weapon discharges under his armpit. All things considered, I think the conclusion of Walbridge that beyond doubt no one else was involved in Schrand's death is an unwarranted conclusion. But that Oswald involved in the death, or is simply, as I have long believed, a diversion from the real issues of the assassination case. After all, how much stock can be put in a Marine scuttlebutt or a rumor of an Oswald connection to Schrand's death? A well-stocked imagination may have dreamed up such connection and then retailed it for attention-getting value in everyday gossip. Apart from such sensationalism, why suspect Oswald more than any other of hundreds of Marines who must have been stationed in the Philippines at the same time? The rude awakening came from me in studying the supporting material for Emory Brown's article in this issue on Oswald's training records at Keesler Air Base in Mississippi. As seen above, Brown found the travel orders to Keesler for one of Oswald's fellow Keesler trainees, Daniel Patrick Powers, contained significant discrepancies from the supposed records of the Keesler training. In reviewing the Warren Commission testimony in which Powers provided this information, I was most surprised to note that 2 of the 6 fellow trainees at Keesler were none other than the accident victim Martin Schrand and the rumor monger Donald Camarada. Powers' testimony makes it fairly clear that 4, at least, of the Keesler trainees, himself, Oswald, Camarada, and Schrand, were more or less buddies during their Keesler stay, their main off-duty activities seemingly being to lounge on the gorgeous Gulf beaches in the area and to eat spaghetti in downtown Biloxi. The 4 of them were subsequently assigned together to the Marine Corps base at Santa Ana, California, and at least 3, Powers, Schrand, and Oswald, were in the same squadron in the Philippines at a time of Schrand's death. On the basis of this extended personal relationship between Oswald and Schrand, Camarada's rumor gains a bit of credence. This Oswald-Schrand relationship having been established, the question remains whether Oswald was in fact involved in Schrand's death, or maybe the relevant question is how he was involved. Were Oswald and this small band of other Keesler radar trainees in fact recruited together at Jacksonville, their home training base, for an intelligence assignment, given their phony Keesler records to cover their time devoted to that assignment, and then assigned on missions together in the Philippines and elsewhere? Did Martin Schrand, perhaps, show signs of defection from this clandestine mission? And was he accordingly granted the usual fate of would-be defectors from clandestine missions? Even if Oswald were not Schrand's executioner, and this seems unlikely, given his known pacifist character, was he involved in the sense that Powers, Oswald, and the others were given the message of what happens to defectors? Before becoming aware of Schrand's involvement with Oswald at Keesler, I would not have regarded such speculative questions as worthy of serious research effort. As it is... ... That's actually a pretty good article, but nonetheless, I still don't think he got the mark right, because we're dealing with 2 Oswalds, which we'll all... God, when my second book on the 2 Oswald comes out, and I'm hoping to get it out this year, it's all going to be his Marine stuff. It's going to blow you the fuck away. You're going to be like, holy shit. Unbelievable. And at one time, Oswald in 3 places at once. 1, 2, 3. All right. So let me see what's left here. This is the document right here that shows. Let me see if I can just spin this. All right. So right here, this part here shows the conflict, the personnel action and the authority stuff. This is where the dates are all wrong and where they. Let me see if there's another place. I think there's another place that indicates it. October 24th. That's correct. Yeah. So this is it right here. The A327330805 changed to 24047, right? So they were in one class that started actually like 2 weeks before when they actually got there. So they didn't find out about this till they get there, but they're in the right class when they get there. So I'm like, this is fucking weird. This is really weird. All right, these are all the footnotes for that. All right, so that looks like that's gonna wrap it up. That is gonna wrap it up for this episode, and I think that's probably gonna wrap it up for the Martin Schrand stuff. You pretty much have a good idea of what happened, and so I'm gonna call it here. And everybody, go out and get my book. It's on Amazon. Get both of them. And yeah, that's it for me, guys. I'll be back on Monday. See ya.